Well, some are calling it the who gets fired first bowl, which means there's going to be a lot at stake, despite it being a match between 2 1-5 teams on Sunday between the Browns and the Dolphins.
As you might expect, the fireworks after this game may be more prolific than the fireworks we see during the 60 minutes on the field on Sunday.
We'll talk about it. It's a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Dolphins coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, Locked On NFL fans? This is Spencer German with Locked On Browns. Obviously, Kyle Krabs with Locked On Dolphins jumping on with me for our latest crossover episode here on a Thursday as we get you ready for the Dolphins and Browns who square off on Sunday. And there's a lot to talk about with this matchup. But before we get into it, I do want to remind you that crossover Thursdays are presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. And Kyle, like I said, the storylines around this game are so big, like off the field. And it's funny, I was talking about this with somebody the other day. This is like the least important game to so many people around the NFL. 2-1-5 teams, like nobody else outside of these two fan bases are really going to be paying attention. But in some ways, it's like the most important game because right. After the Titans obviously fired Brian Callahan this week, now it's like all bets are off. Like who's going to be the next coach fired? And in a lot of ways, it's two teams who are kind of heading in that direction where their coach is very much on the hot seat. How are you sort of getting yourself, situated, I guess, mentally for what might play out on Sunday between these two teams and kind of what's at stake here for both of them?
Yeah, it's funny. This game in some ways reminds me, Miami was in a very different place organizationally, but it reminds me of 2019 when they had like the teardown year and they played Washington. I think it was week 6 and Miami was 0-5 and Washington was 0-4. And they were two winless teams, and Washington ended up picking second in that year's NFL draft. And they won this game because Miami went for 2 with 6 seconds left in regulation. And that was the first year with Brian Flores, and they had a big comeback in that game, but they had gotten smoked in their first 3 games, was losing by like 28 points a game. Dolphins offense isn't that bad, but the Dolphins defense is pretty close to as bad as it was in 2019 at this stage. And a lot of it is an inability to stop the run, their front structures, their ability to play the run. So that for me is, I don't know that this game, if it goes poorly, will be like for whom the bell tolls for Mike McDaniel. But if they do lose this game and they continue to have run game issues on the ground defensively, and I am petrified of what Quinshon Judkins is capable of doing in this game.
Yeah.
It could be the end for somebody on Mike McDaniel's staff. And I would assume Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator, would be front row center there. And it's unfortunate because this unit has a brand new secondary. None of these guys that were here last year. The entire defensive interior is remodeled. They got 3 rookies that take snaps for them, depending on what week it is of the season. So in some ways, it's like, yeah, you're in a transitional year, but there's been no consistent growth. And when you have something like that and the team hoped they would be competitive this year, man, it really ups the stakes when you start 1-5.
It's interesting you say that because, and this is like the outsider perspective. I see a team in Miami that it feels like the turmoil was creeping in even during the offseason. Like you had some of the comments made by Tyreek Hill and how people weren't really sure if he still wanted to be there or not. And then that kind of rolled into the regular season and then they get off to a bad start. And then now they're 1-5 and you got Tua saying what he said after the game the other day, which we'll get into here in a second. But I kind of went into this game feeling like again, this is the outside perspective on it. I was like, this might be like if Mike McDaniel loses on Sunday, like the last straw for him where it's like, hey, he is fired on Monday. And I felt differently about Kevin Stefanski from my perspective where, I kind of approached this game as Kevin Stefanski came into the year, and I think ownership wants to they want to give these guys a chance to fix this thing. And so I think they came into the season feeling like, all right, let's see how this year goes. But it felt like they were going to be back in 2026. And now things are teetering in a different direction where it was kind of like, if you lose the Dolphins, I don't think Kevin Stefanski gets fired on Monday, but I think it starts that spiraling towards he's probably going to get fired. And so I felt like they were kind of in different places. But you're saying you don't even know if Mike McDaniel would necessarily get fired on Monday, but that you think somebody might pay the price if they lose this game.
Yeah, and it comes in large part because of the similar frame of mind that it sounds like Jimmy Haslam has with this coaching staff here in Cleveland. And Stephen Ross wants this to work. He likes Mike McDaniel, and he wants to give it a fair shake to see the growth and see the improvement and see kind of the fruits of this transition from they went kind of all in 2023 and they were paying a lot of guys. They traded a bunch of draft picks for a bunch of mature contracts, and they're paying the price for that now. So the thing that would unravel this is if the Tua Tagovailoa comments create that rift within the locker room between the coaches and the locker room. And there's been kind of passive aggressive, like after losses all year long, whether it was week one, Mike McDaniel said that the players let the process of prepping for the game get bigger than the game itself, and they weren't ready to play. In week two, the players blasted the coaching staff for some communication and personnel issues that cost them 12 men on the field in a delay game and a potential game-winning drive that they had in the fourth quarter. Game three, it was Mike McDaniel and Tua had directly conflicting messages on where the ball was supposed to go on an interception in the final 3 minutes. Game five, when they lost to Carolina, Bradley Chubb came out and said, yeah, he kind of took her foot off the gas here, and I think guys got comfortable. And Mike McDaniel after the game did say that. And then obviously in week six, you have Tua saying what Tua says. So every loss this year, there's been some kind of after the game, you hear what somebody has to say, and you're like, that really felt like you felt it was important for everybody to know that this wasn't your fault that this thing went wrong. And if Tua accelerates that, I think that's where this really does get off the rails.
Do you think it will unravel? Because I saw Tua apologized on Wednesday for the comments. And listen, from a Browns perspective on this, since Kevin Stefanski's been here, there hasn't been a lot of that going on. Like there hasn't been a lot of guys but the one example I can give you is like back when Baker Mayfield was in Cleveland, what a time to be alive that was. Fans are obviously here very, they're very envious of what Baker's doing now in Tampa. But back when Baker Mayfield was in Cleveland, there was a couple instances where we saw that, like early on in his career. I want to say it might have even been his rookie year. He made comments about Duke Johnson, who was a running back on the team at the time, about like him not getting paid. Like he was missing camp because he hadn't gotten his contract extension. And he kind of said like, well, hey, if he doesn't want to be here, he doesn't have to be here. And then that was the thing that was in the locker room. Yeah. Then you had the Myles Garrett, the infamous like helmet game where he hit Mason Rudolph with the helmet. And Baker goes on like immediately after the game. He's the person they're interviewing. And he basically calls out Myles Garrett and says, yeah, you can't do stuff like that. And that sort of created a rift between him and Myles Garrett from that point forward. So, like, we've seen examples of this, even though it hasn't been quite as prevalent in recent years under Kevin Stefanski. But it's the biggest no-no when it comes to like a team environment. And so I'm curious, like, how you think that will be, if the apology will be reciprocated, how you think they kind of rally from that, because that's a pretty big deal. Like on the outside looking in, some people might look and say, all right, like Tua's, trying to be a leader here, and that's good. But on the inside, I think internally with the team, that's like the worst possible thing that you can do.
Yeah, and I think the challenging part about it too is, Mike is very laissez-faire with his locker room, and he's very pro. It's your locker room as the players. You guys handle these kinds of things. I think if you were going to completely smooth it over and it was not going to have scar tissue, I think you would probably have to have another leadership presence, aka the head coach, who is a little bit more hands-on with that kind of stuff. When there's some rumors about Bradley Chubb as a potential trade target by the trade deadline, he's one of the captains on the team. Like if he goes, you already had the exodus of Teron Armstead, and Jalen Ramsey left, and Calais Campbell left this past offseason. So you kind of have like this what feels like a top of the food chain vacuum that exists right now. And you can feel guys have tried to step up and step into those roles. And for Tua, and I think the intent is probably in the right place, and the execution of it was not. And a couple of his offensive linemen were asked about it on Monday, and they effectively threw their hands up and said, look, no comment. Like what's in-house is in-house. So I will be very curious to see how easily they are able to transition through that, because even guys on Wednesday, as we're talking on Wednesday night, Jalen Phillips was asked about it, and he kind of said, I don't think anybody should take exception unless they were one of the guys that wasn't showing up, in which case, you got to show up. So you even continue to have differing opinions on it throughout the course of the week this week, which is not really what a team needs when you're trying to get focused and win a game because you've won one in 6 tries.
Yeah, I think that really does set the tone for what we're about to witness on Sunday. I know we have a ton more to still get into. You talked about Quinshon Judkins against this defense. I want to talk about the Browns defense versus the Dolphins offense as well. So we'll get into some of those things. I know you have some questions for me, Kyle, that we'll get into as well. A lot more to come as we dive into some of the X's and O's between the Browns and the Dolphins coming up on Sunday. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. That's where Bilt comes in. Bilt is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through Bilt, you can earn flexible points that can be redeemed towards hundreds of hotels, airlines, a future rent payment, or your next Lyft ride and more. But Bilt isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. I love that with Bilt. Your rent finally works for you. You're earning points every month on something that you already have to pay anyway. So turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood. Just go to joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure you use that link so they know we sent you. This episode is also brought to you by Mint Mobile. If you're still overpaying for wireless, it's time to say yes to saying no. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no averages, no fees, no hidden fees, no BS. I said yes to making the switch and getting premium wireless for just $15 a month. Mint makes it simple. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk to text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even bring your own phone and keep the same number in all of your contacts. Here's the other thing. It's super easy to set up. Like I said, if you have another provider right now for your wireless service, you can keep your number. That's key. And then you get your phone set up in minutes and you're off and running. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. Upfront payment of $45 is required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time, new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, so back at it here on our crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Dolphins. Kyle Krabs, Spencer German here with you. I let you have the floor, Kyle, for a lot of the first segment to talk about just the state of the Dolphins. But I think there's some interesting sort of perspectives here on how these two teams do square up when it comes to actually on the field. And I want to sort of get your thoughts on because here's my thing. I think when I look at this game and I try to decipher like who I think is going to win, I see a Browns team that has one thing they do like at an elite level. Their defense is an elite level defense. And I see a Dolphins team that their defense is a mess. Their offense is pretty good. Their offense can score some points, but against this Browns defense, I kind of wonder how they're going to stack up. And so for me, that's kind of the key matchup that I'm looking at is that offense versus the Browns defense, because if this Browns defense can slow that Dolphins offense down the way that they've done with other teams this year and teams with even better offenses than I think Miami has, then I think this is maybe the game where the Browns offense finally is able to find some life and do some things, particularly on the ground, running the football, and maybe put up enough points to win a game. Maybe they score 20 points finally for the first time in 11 games. We'll see. And so that I think that's kind of an interesting outlook on how I'm approaching this game but at the same time, because the Browns offense has been so bad, it's one of those deals where I'm cautiously optimistic for them because it's so bad that I don't know what to expect week to week. And they could be completely terrible again and only be able to score like 13 points, 17 points. And I've seen the Dolphins put up, 20 plus points multiple times this season. So for me, I think that Browns defense is going to be the key, but that's also kind of the key for the Browns every single week, it seems.
Yeah, it really is an interesting matchup of strengths and weaknesses where if you get the right kind of game script against the Dolphins and Mike McDaniel, he usually will be pretty quick to have a hook on the run game. And I know teams have not had success running the ball with consistency at all against Cleveland. I know 4 of the 6 opponents have failed to break 100 yards rushing as a team. And I know they started really strong in that regard. And having an answer for Myles Garrett, I think, is a big challenge. I think one thing that Miami has done more of since the injury to Tyreek Hill that I think actually makes this a more compelling matchup for that Browns run defense against Miami is they've played a lot more 22 personnel with 2 backs and 2 tight ends on the field at the same time, where you can split them and put them on one on either side. You can really expand the front and create extra gaps and extra bodies and force Myles, if you want to do it to his side, you could force him to potentially have to widen out and move him further away from the ball to start and give him more bodies to have to sort and sift through. And they are the NFL's best 22 personnel offense by like 3 times more than the next highest team. And they actually pass the ball at a 55% rate with 2 backs and 2 tight ends on the field at the same time. So you can get some Ollie Gordon and Devon Achane in passing situations. You can go fullback traditional and go with Ollie Gordon, the big back, for some heavy stuff. So I think that personnel group, they ran 14 plays out of 22 against the Chargers. They had 2 touchdowns out of it, 2 rushing touchdowns out of it, and they had 2 more explosive plays out of it. That personnel package for me is where I think Miami's offense has to live without Tyreek Hill. And if you had Tyreek Hill, it'd be a non-starter, right? Because if Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, you'd say, well, I want to have 2 wide receivers on the field. I can't do that. So I think that's the personnel package for me, that if the Browns front has the right answer for when Miami loads the tight ends on the field at the same time and has the opportunity to try to go heavy, then I think that's where Cleveland's best recipe for success is. Look, I don't think anybody's run for less than 140 yards against the Dolphins this year. Sorry, we had the Patriots only ran for 122 in week 2. It's 156, 122, 157, 197, 239, and 140. So the Browns are going to be able to move the ball on the ground. Now, how much stress they can avoid in long and late downs with Dillon Gabriel, I think that's the defining thing for them, where they've been very bad on 3rd and shorts. They're very good on 3rd and longs. They just don't earn enough 3rd and longs to consistently do it. And I think that's obviously the recipe with a rookie quarterback in his 3rd start. And I'd love to get your perspective a little bit on Dillon and how he's executed. I know there hasn't been a lot of aggressiveness in the offense, but the ball security has been a big change versus what it was with Joe Flacco.
No doubt. I'll talk about Dillon here in a second, because I was going to say, as you were talking about like the heavy personnel that they like to use with the 2 tight ends, the 2 running backs, what I find interesting about that is obviously last week, the Browns just played a Steelers team that runs a ton of like 13 personnel. And they showed that in the game. First play of the game, they ran a pass play where the tight end came in. One of their tight ends came, like, motioned in, ran off the like sort of the inside part of one of the other tight ends, gets open, big play, 36 yards, and they're already in business to sort of start the game. And so I think if the Dolphins are going to do that, if they're going to utilize multiple tight ends, multiple running backs, I kind of want to see what that, like, how effective their offense is, because it seemed like the Steelers were able to sort of find some places to have success downfield doing that. So I'm curious to see how they defend that this week after seeing a little bit of that last week. Not quite 22 personnel, but definitely some like more tight ends and things in there that can do different things for them. But on the Dillon Gabriel side of things, like, listen, the Browns absolutely, to your point on the Dolphins run game, they have to rely on Quinshon Judkins in this game to sort of set the tone for what they're going to do offensively. And that's been the story for a while now. But this past week, and I think Kevin Stefanski actually expressed a little bit of regret about this in his Monday press conference that he does after the games, where he was asked about not having Quinshon in a key spot in the game. They had like 1st and goal from inside the Steelers 10, and they were like threatening to score a touchdown. And Quinshon gets taken out, and they brought in Jerome Ford. And then I think they passed it 4 straight times in that series, if I remember correctly. And so there was a lot of questions like, why isn't your best offensive weapon out there on the field right now when you're near the goal line and you're trying to score? And he was asked about it, and I think he kind of expressed that he was a little regretful that he didn't utilize Quinshon more. So that's where it all starts for them. And if they can do that, I think this is a game where you can get Dillon Gabriel feeling a little more comfortable, and he'll be able to do a little bit more of what the Browns hope that he can do in running this offense. It has been great that ball security has been a priority for this team with him, and that he hasn't turned the ball over, because first 4 weeks of the season, I mean, this team's turnover differential was just awful, and it was costing them games. Like that's the biggest reason I think they made the switch to Dillon Gabriel. I think Kevin Stefanski understood like this wasn't necessarily going to make the offense immensely better, but if they could just protect the football, it didn't put the offense behind the 8 ball, and that's the thing that Dillon I think can hang his hat on right now. But I said it last week. Like last week was a tough game to grade Dillon even on. Because, like, yeah, there's things that you can tell, like rookie mistakes. He's missing guys at times when he does have a clean pocket, but he was hit 16 times in that game. Yeah. And the offensive line play has been so dreadful this year that it's hard to evaluate any quarterback, rookie or otherwise, when they constantly feel like they're under pressure, their clock is being sped up. All those things matter. And so I think Dillon certainly has room to grow. And this feels like a game where maybe we'll get a chance to actually see what he can do, because I'm not as worried about the Dolphins just like completely dismantling the Browns offense the way that I have been with other teams. Granted, the Browns offensive line is so bad that maybe the Dolphins will actually have a lot of success doing that, because every other team has also had success doing that. We have a few more things to get into here as we look ahead to the path to victory for both these teams. I actually had an interesting stat as I compare the Dolphins to the Steelers that I think I want to get into as well.
Oh, no. I don't think I'm going to like that comparison.
No, I think you will, actually. So We'll get into that coming up on a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Dolphins. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick awards than anyone as of August of 2025. They make cars that keep your family protected. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. Plus, all-wheel drive comes standard in every crossover SUV, so you can drive with confidence through almost any season, which is great if you live in Cleveland, because this time of year, you can get all 4 seasons in one day sometimes, and so that helps your cause. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every moment count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, back at it on our crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Dolphins, getting you ready for kickoff on Sunday. I'll share this now, because since I was comparing the Dolphins to the Steelers, I'll just kind of repurpose this and go back to it for a second. But I found this interesting. Both the Dolphins and the Steelers are two of the worst teams in terms of average yards allowed per opponent's drives. The Steelers are 30th. They give up 36.5 yards per opponent drive. The Dolphins are 32nd. They're dead last. They give up 40.7 yards per drive. But, and this is where I think you're going to like this stat, they also are two of the best teams in terms of red zone efficiency. They're actually tied with 50% in terms of holding opponents out of the end zone, which is 4th best in the NFL. I thought that was kind of interesting, because it does, to me, sort of show that the Dolphins defense is, capable of giving up big plays and being sort of moving the football on, but that it seems like when they get down the red zone, they are able to tighten things up. And that's where I think it could be a problem for the Browns, because they've moved the ball a little bit here or there, but it is when they get in that red zone that they have some troubles, and they just can't seem to punch it in for touchdowns.
Yeah, it is really eye-opening to kind of look at some of the splits for the Dolphins on a per drive basis. I mean, it's 7 plays over 40 yards per drive, more than 3 points per drive allowed defensively through 6 games. I think I saw it is the lowest percentage of drives with forced punts through 6 games, like since the turn of the millennium. It's like that's how long it's been since a team has had less success generating punts. And then when they do generate punts, you have running into the kicker on a 4th and 3 against the Colts in week 1. You're tied at 21 against the Bills in the 4th quarter in week 3, and you rough the punter and they go on and score a touchdown like 3 plays later and you lose the game off of that. It's just silly. They had a field goal where you had a personal foul for leveraging the long snapper this past week against the Chargers. It's just little attention to details, right? And I think that's one of the things that drives you nuts about a team, where you look at the depth chart and you see Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Chop Robinson, a pass rusher, Jordan Brooks at linebacker, Minkah Fitzpatrick at safety, Rasul Douglas has been good at corner. You say, hey, they have some individual talent here. It's the attention to detail. It's all the little things. It's the margins of the game, and that, if you're not a cohesive unit, you're not going to have those things buttoned up, and it continues to bite the Dolphins in these 1-score losses that they continue to roll in. And I expect this is going to be another close game between these two teams on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And it's funny, as you say that, I feel like you're just like preaching to the choir here, because it's the same. The Browns are doing, it's the same thing with the Browns. Like, I watch these games week over week, and it's like, oh, special teams error. Oh, missed tackle here. Oh, penalty here. Oh, drop passes. Offensive line doesn't know who they're supposed to block. It's all those little things. And what's crazy is, in the NFL, like, so many of these games come down, like, you win in the margins, and those are the things that determine the results of games. Like, there is Browns fans love going back and pointing to, well, hey, if we just make a kick in week 1 against the Bengals, we have another win. Or if Denzel Ward, drops in coverage or forces Jordan Addison inside in the London game a couple weeks ago on that last play of the game, they beat that team. And so, but it's the fundamental things that are costing both these teams right now. And it's why they're facing off at such an interesting time, as we kind of alluded to in the first segment there. But yeah, the parallels between these two teams right now are so interesting, in the wrong way, because, it'd be better if they were like two really good teams and they did a lot of things really well. But it is kind of funny how they're sort of colliding at this almost perfect time in that way. What is, in your opinion, Kyle, the path to victory for the Miami Dolphins on Sunday, knowing they have to go against this really good Browns defense, but that they have some offensive players that can certainly pose a threat? And how do they maybe stop a Browns run game, that this could be the week where they finally find something and unlock something there?
Yeah, I think a couple things. Offensively, we talked about the 22 personnel package. I think that's a massive element of what Miami is doing well offensively right now, and that investment in that package, keeping their willingness and appetite to run the football throughout the course of a 60-minute game. Defensively, I'd say two things. I'd like to see more odd front looks, where you occupy, you look at that Browns offensive line and those veterans that they have at guard. That entire interior trio is guys that have been successful regardless of how late in their careers, chapter-wise, they are at this point in the game. Covering those guys up, because this is not the kind of back that you want to let get vertical through the first level of the defense with momentum. And that's what Judkins has the ability to really punish you and get your DBs in trouble if he gets through the point of attack. So play a little bit more base. And by extension off of that, I want to take some of the air out of the coverage on the back end, knowing that Dillon Gabriel is a little more risk averse right now, as a guy that has that point of emphasis, as a young guy that doesn't want to create turnovers and make mistakes with the football. Run some simulated pressures if you want to, but don't play so far off. Dare him to read it correctly and work the ball and push the ball with aggressiveness, and let him prove that he's willing to do that. And if he does that, and if he does that with consistency and without mistakes, then you tip your cap and you hope your offense can work you out. But to play super off and say, hey, we're going to be really conservative and have Dillon throw the ball 52 times and have a bunch of completions that are within however many yards of the line of scrimmage like we did against Pittsburgh, like, you're just, I think, leaning into what they want to be as an extension of the run game with the short passing game. So I think you have to challenge those throws and force more low percentage throws with how you play them in coverage.
I think that's a good philosophy, honestly, especially when you got a rookie quarterback who, as you said, doesn't want to make those big mistakes. We know he's going to take the easy stuff, but by and large, if the Browns get their run game going, though, I think that does open Dillon up to maybe try some things and take some shots and be a little more risk adverse, which I think is something that he has to probably do a little bit more of at times. I understand protecting the football is super valuable, but let's face it, like the best quarterbacks in this league are the best quarterbacks in this league because sometimes they're not afraid to take those throws that might be tight window that could be an interception. So that's I think one of the things he has to keep working on. But I do think like as you laid out, that is kind of the path forward for Miami. For the Browns, I think I alluded to it already, but they got to get the run game going. This feels like the first time, like there's obviously at this point he has a career day, but this could be like a career game for Quinshon Judkins type performance if they can run as successfully as other teams have against Miami so far this season. And that'd be massive because I think that allows the offense to settle in. And then, I mean, defensively, that 22 personnel that you threw at me, I think is interesting because I didn't necessarily know offhand that that's how much they were utilizing that personnel group. And I worry a little bit about how the Browns handle and defend tight ends because we just saw the Steelers kind of pick them apart using multiple tight end sets. And, you throw in multiple backs now into the mix too. I kind of wonder how they'll handle that. You still have a corner who's still kind of getting acclimated to Cleveland and Tyson Campbell that they just traded for last week. So, can he sort of in another week be a little bit more up to speed on everything? We'll see. But yeah, I think, again, I kind of go into this game feeling as though because the Browns have that one elite unit on defense, that they'll be able to do enough to limit Miami's offense and give the Browns offense a chance. And this feels like one of the first games where the Browns offense might actually be able to do some things. So I'm going into it sitting here as we record this and drop it on our crossover Thursday here, feeling optimistic about the Browns' chances. But like I said, man, like this offense is historically bad. And I just don't know. Like I could wake up Sunday and have a completely different feeling on it because for all I know, they could just lay an egg, and I wouldn't be surprised by that either because it's been so bad.
Yeah, it really is. It's a high variance game, right? And who gets their guys ready to play? And the fact that Cleveland's at home, I think is really helpful for them with Miami and the extra bells and whistles that go into your preparations when you got to travel. And maybe they'll bond on the flight up. Who knows? But it would certainly be sorely needed after what this week has brought for the Dolphins thus far.
No doubt about it. Same for the Browns if they can pull it off. But nonetheless, there will certainly be a lot of things to say after the outcome of this game on Sunday. It's why I dubbed it an important, unimportant game because nobody outside of these two fan bases really probably care. But there is a lot at stake here, I think, in this game overall. Real quick, Kyle, before we sign off here, did you catch in London 2 weeks ago for the Browns the quote from Grant Delpit, who said he was asked to basically describe Cleveland to people in London that weren't familiar with Cleveland, and he jokingly said, "Yeah, it's just like Miami."
Heck yeah, I love Grant too. So that's a gem. I love that.
It was pretty funny. And I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Trainwreck, but I instantly went to the scene in Trainwreck where LeBron is sitting at the table and he's like, "How come you never visit me in Cleveland?" Well, there's no difference between Miami and Cleveland. So I thought that was pretty funny. Anyway, we'll call it the battle for very balmy cities here instead of the battle for who gets fired first. But he's Kyle Krabs. I'm Spencer German. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us for this crossover episode of Locked On Browns and Locked On Dolphins. Make sure, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button to either of our channels. Make Kyle your first listen. Make myself at Locked On Browns your second listen, or vice versa, depending on which team you cheer for. We appreciate your support as always, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts and, of course, at our respective YouTube channels, Locked On Browns and Locked On Dolphins. Thank you for hanging out with us. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and we'll both talk to you again after Sunday's game real soon. See you.